This session will show you how to build the Gravity application that you see here. The application is structured into three parts: the header, which was built in a previous session, the list, which we will build now, and an editor. The list is using a manager service. This service is pre-configured in this application and provides a list and data for the list, and the editor is actually using a media object directly. Let's start our development by quickly reviewing the setup environment. We've got a module, top-level module, and the UI service of a Hello Gravity header module is already in place. So if we run the application at this point, we will simply see a header and there's no content. Let's create the module for the UI service list next. So we'll do that by saying new MXML module and give it the name. So this is going to be for our list. Hello Gravity list underbar module. Now it's quite important to turn off the do not optimize for the application. If you don't do this, it's possible that some runtime classes will be missing. So we'll finish that. And that gives our module. Now I'm just going to cut and paste in the code for this. So as you can see, it's very simple really. It's we've got a list model. So this is an ActionScript class that backs the user interface portion. I'll create that in just a moment. But you'll see that this is really just a panel, B group, and so on. Nothing too surprising here. Some images. And the image, though, is bound to something from our model. So this is the coding style that we happen to use. It's not dictated by Gravity. You can use a style from many different frameworks or your own personal preference, but this is what we find works quite well. So our image is looking for something out of the model, active media, image URL. So that's where the image data is coming from. Similarly, the list is looking for its data provider out of the model's media list, and when something is selected, it says model.setActiveMedia with the content of the change in the list. Buttons for adding media, model.addMedia, model.deleteMedia. Let's create our model. The model is a simple ActionScript file, so let's go in and do that as ActionScript class, and this will be called Hello Gravity list. It's called media list model, I think is what I called it. And again, I'm going to cut and paste in the contents for this file. Now this isn't, it's fairly straightforward. The important part to highlight is right here, is that this is a bindable property called Media Manager. It's an iMedia Manager. And this is something that is going to be bind injected through the Gravity configuration. And it's through this Media Manager that the underlying services are called. The rest are just simple getters and setters, as you would expect. Going back to the module now, if I save, our images should all work. Whoops, sorry, I haven't saved this one, that's why. There we go, everything's compiling. The next thing that we need is the manifest files, or the Gravity configuration files for our new list service. So again, I'm going to copy these from an external source, and I'll just paste them right here into the manifest. And that's just added a Gravity list module and a list. So if we take a look at the first one, the Gravity list module, you'll see that this is our bundle declaration. So this is saying that we've got a new bundle, and it is located Gravity list module.swith. So this is the location. If you remember, we created a Gravity list module here as a module. We can double check that that in fact did compile out a Swift file by taking a look in the debug bin directory and Gravity list module Swift. So there it is right here. That's the module that got compiled in a Swift file. So we're saying that this particular Swift represents our bundle, and we're doing some declarations here. This is saying that this is a parent domain using Flex 4.5.0. So that's a shared Flex SDK. so that we don't have to reload the Flex SDK every time. Now this particular bundle has a declaration to say that it requires a Media Manager service. This is what will tell Gravity, if necessary, to go off and dynamically load that service. The services may or may not actually be loaded. They're only loaded on demand often. So this, we need it, so we're going to tell Gravity to go and load it if needed. So we're going to import that. Now we're saying we've got some beans, and this import, which is our other file that we brought in, contains the actual service configuration. We find it slightly simpler to keep these into two separate files. It's your preference, you don't have to do this, but if we keep it in two separate files, it's a little bit easier to keep track of the bundle part of the declaration with the Swift file versus the service config. The last part is we're doing a declaration to say that this is using the Flex 4.5. Looking at the service part of this configuration, hello gravity list.gxml. Now much of this is boilerplate code, which is why we like to have it separated into its own file. You can copy and paste a sample and then just make minor modifications. So most of the work is in this class here, which will simply be provided. The service declaration, again, this is boilerplate code. We're using a UiService factory to create our service. The important part is that this service is being registered under the name Hello Gravity List. So this is the name that we want to use to register our service and ultimately look up this particular list service when it gets used. The description, this is used if you happen to have a service browser available, and you can see the description. So here we've created a service. The bean that actually implements that service is here. Again, mostly boilerplate code that will do that. But the important part that is different from what we did earlier is that this particular bean is being injected with a property. So right here, we're saying is that our component.model.mediaManager, that's what we showed you earlier out of our model, model.mediaManager, is being bind injected with this bean right here, this Media Manager. This Media Manager here is a reference. This is a reference to this following, using this interface for a service. So we're saying there's out there somewhere a service has been registered against the iMedia Manager interface. We're going to go off and find that service, store it locally under the name Media Manager. Now that becomes a bean within the context of this environment that can now be used for bind injection here. Going back to our previous slide, what we have in place now is we created this media list service here. We looked up the Media Manager service under the interface name, and we set up the binding such that this media list was bound to this media service. That gives it access to the media list used to populate this data, as well as the function of the service, which are required for when we're clicking on the list or hitting the add and delete buttons. Our media list service should now be ready to be placed onto the main application. So we have a couple of configuration files for the Hello Gravity List module. So we have to then tell Gravity application, or Hello Gravity application, that they exist. So if you remember from the setup configuration video, Hello Gravity is the top level configuration file. So let's go there and we'll see all of the configuration files that exist in the application so far. And we've got a header, but we don't have our list. So let's duplicate the header. It's just simpler to copy and paste sometimes. So we'll do that, and we're going to bring in our Hello Gravity list module. So that's the one that we just created a moment ago. So that's told Gravity that that this particular list module should be part of our environment. But we haven't actually included it into any API yet, but the module is now ready to be used. So we're going to go back now to our main application, and if I open that, you'll see that this is where we had a UI service that was causing the header to show up at the top of the application. Well, we now have a list module that should be ready to use. So save some time, let's just copy that, and if you remember, we configured this as Hello Gravity List. I'll just show you that again as a quick reminder. If we go back to the Hello Gravity List where we did our configuration, when we set up this bean here, this service was registered as Hello Gravity List, so that's where we created the service under that name. Now we're going to use the service by looking up the same name. We should be ready to test it. So do this, debug as. And there we go. We have our header as we had before, but we've now added the media list on here, and as you can see, the data is live. Now, we can add something, and it did in fact enter some new data. However, we don't have the editor in yet. Let's do that. The media editor is very similar to the list we just created, so I've already brought in the files. So our media editor uses a model, an editor model, similar to the other one. And this is a panel, V-group, and a form. So nothing too surprising here. This is just form data. Note though that it is in fact getting its data through the model, similar to the other one. So model.activemedia.id and so on. So that's how it pulls in all of its data. For the updates, the ones that can be updated do a change where they ask the model. The model is exposing methods to push the data into it. Okay, so each of the fields work this way, is that there's a method on our model. Let's take a look at the model, the media editor model. It's a simple little class that holds some data. Now the important thing though is to note that this particular model is holding on just a piece of media. It's not holding the service. It doesn't need to know anything about a service. It just says as long as it was given a piece of media to work with that implements the iMedia interface, it would be happy. The manifest files for the editor, if I just open that. Okay, again, this is our bundle located hello editor module.swif. This is a parent domain flex45. It's importing. It does in fact require the same media manager, and the service is configured in a separate file, as was done before. The actual service is configured. Whoops, wrong editor here. Open with the text editor. And again, a lot of boilerplate code, very similar to the other one. The same import file, same declaration, type of declaration for the service. We have configured this one to be Hello Gravity Editor. So this is our declaration for a service that is going to be our editor. Slightly different description, and this is the bean that is creating the actual implementation of the service. But now the only real difference here from the list, note that this is also looking up the same media manager service as a bean, as a reference to a service right here. But when we bind it in, it's slightly different than the other one, than the list was, because remember our model in this case was looking for just a piece of active media. So it's just looking for an iMedia object. It doesn't need the service, it just needs the media object that's inside it. So I can say from this service, this media manager, I can look in and find the active media and bind that in. It allows my bean to be a little bit more decoupled from the service. It doesn't need to know about the service, any particular service that happens to have a piece of media available to it could be used with this particular editor. Let's wire our new editor into our application. So the first thing is going to the top level configuration file for the application, Hello Gravity. We'll open that, and we have to include our new configuration file for the list. This has now told the application that the editor is available for use. Editor is now available for use. Now let's go to the main module. Main module. Now we really want our list and our editor to be side by side, not just vertical to each other. So let's replace this. Replace this with a divided box, and the divided box has a UI service of our list with the editor beside it. And if I run the application one more time, there we go. A simple master detail application using Gravity, where the list is tied to a domain model. It knows nothing about the editor. The editor is tied to a piece of media. It knows nothing about the list.